And welcome back to Couch Critic with me, Dennis P. And in this edition of the Couch Critic, we're going to be looking at a certain Liam ROSENIOR. Now, there's lots of stuff online about how he plays tactically, and there's pros and cons about his system. We're going to be looking at and analyzing his play at Strasbourg and whether or not it's translatable to this Chelsea side. Now, listen, first and foremost, I'm not here to convince you of anything. We're just going to be looking at the tactical approach to his play, and you decide whether or not this is something you want to see at Chelsea. I don't think we have a choice in the matter anyways. But I wanted to quickly just talk about how I see Liam ROSENIOR's appointment as a Chelsea manager first and foremost. It's not the most inspiring signing for me. I do think that this appointment was thrusted onto the hierarchy of Blue Coal, mainly because Maresca was just sick of being micromanaged, and obviously the relationship became untenable. And this assignment of Liam ROSENIOR is now a byproduct of the decision from Maresca to part ways with Blue Coal. And in the wake of that, we have a manager who I think is just being thrown to the wolves. Let's just be real. He was given the position as Chelsea manager in the middle of the season when we have all sorts of objectives that need to be met. We're talking about the cups that we're involved in, and we're talking about obviously top four finish, and of course Champions League. With that said, I think that this job is a bit of a poison pill. It's one that obviously Liam ROSENIOR could not turn down. It's a massive step up. It's a huge responsibility, and nobody in their right mind would turn down an opportunity to manage a club as big as Chelsea. But with that comes the expectation of winning, and the way I see it, he's going to have a really tough time implementing his tactics, implementing his philosophy and his principles in a very short time. We have a match every 3 to 4 days, and it's going to be hard for him to install all of his principles when there isn't a lot of time on the training pitch to work through it. But he is obviously a well-spoken manager, a guy that gets in front of the camera and says the right things. He is a guy that clearly is about motivation and finding ways to get the best out of his players. Now, we're just going to be looking specifically at the tactics and what works, what doesn't, and whether or not it's translatable to Chelsea. But I wanted to say that I'm going to give him every opportunity to succeed. He is a Chelsea manager. The only manager I did not back at Chelsea was way back in 2013 when we had Rafa Benitez in charge. Every other manager will get my respect, will get my backing, and Liam ROSENIOR is no different. We're going to be looking at his tactics at Strasbourg and seeing if it is translatable. Now, the first thing I want to cover is the play out from the back. As always, teams that want to have possession and control the play will certainly want to be able to play out from the back and dominate possession from deep, and I think Liam ROSENIOR is no different in that regard. A lot of the work that he did at Strasbourg was very much reminiscent of the work done by Roberto De Zerbi when he was at Brighton and continued on, I guess, at Marseille now. And lots of the principles that were installed there seem to be very similar to that of Roberto De Zerbi, and we're going to be looking at a few of those things right now. Now, obviously, the first thing that's going to stick out for you here is the shape. They play with a 4-2-2 with the back four stretched out across the back line, really wide to create lots of space. And the central midfielders, the pivot, playing inside with the striker and the number 10 creating that box in the middle. And then you'll have the wingers basically stretched out to the touch lines and high up the pitch to hold the width. And of course, the idea here is to force the press, the defenders, to commit bodies forward and play through them by making the pitch really big. Now, they do play direct every now and then. They will look to go long and just release the wingers in behind, but for the most part, their build up out from the back is very slow and languid. Their defenders and the center backs and the fullbacks will often recycle possession until they get themselves in an ideal position to get the ball forward. And once it gets into the midfield, what they're trying to do there is speed up the attack. What the hope is now is that they've drawn enough people forward in their rope-a-dope, sort of like backwards passing, sideways passes, that it opens up the spaces and entices enough guys forward that they can get in behind now and speed up their play from there. So usually in about the second to third phase, you will see them look to be a little bit more quick with their movements. You'll see a lot of like orchestrated moves off the ball with the wingers and the midfielders. The idea then is to speed up the play and look to get into the attacking position as quickly as possible. Not too dissimilar from what we've seen from De Zerbi at his Brighton days. Now, the next aspect of their build-up phase that I think needs to be analyzed is the use of the goalkeeper, and Liam Rosenior, very similar to Roberto De Zerbi, have the goalkeeper as an integral part in their first phase build-up. Very comfortable on the ball, good passer, and fearless in possession. These are the traits that you have to possess when you're playing in the style of play that Liam Rosenior demands from his goalkeepers. And in Michael Penders, they certainly have somebody who possesses those qualities. And, you know, clearly he is used as a center back when they're building out, less so than as a goalkeeper. And while it does lead to a few errors and mistakes in the back, they continually go back to this. And it's something that I am a little bit trepidatious about seeing implemented at Chelsea, just because of the frenetic pace that the league is played at and the style of keepers that we have now. Robert Sanchez has improved a lot this season in terms of his overall play, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've opted to abandon some of the principles that Maresca was implementing in terms of like ball control, you know, fearlessness in possession, and opting for, you know, when in doubt, kick it out or just go long. And I'm just going to keep it a buck right now. I don't know if I trust Robert Sanchez or Jorgensen in the Premier League to be playing outside their box as judiciously as we see Penders play with the Strasbourg team. And it's something that we have to consider. Like, obviously the system demands it. I don't think anybody at Chelsea feels comfortable with Robert Sanchez being outside of his box playing as a center back. He's just too eccentric for that particular role. I don't think he's composed and a cool enough head. Not really as fearless he's definitely fearless, but I think it's fearless for the wrong reasons. It's not somebody that's like in control of all of his actions and stuff like that. And if that becomes part of the overall game plan, I think that like his lapses in judgment and in concentration could cost us dearly. It's something to watch. Obviously, it creates an opportunity where, you know, you have an extra defender, an extra willing receiver of the ball, and it forces the pressers to commit more bodies forward. And then once you do that, they have you, because they have the extra body, they have the numerical advantage, and the next action when they do entice you forward is to be very decisive in their passing sequences in the second and third phase of the build-up. And it's there where you see the most movement and the most speed in and agility in their attack. It's going to be interesting to see if Liam Rosenior decides to play with the same sort of like tactics that he's employed at Strasbourg, especially when you're thinking about the build-up phase, because I think that a lot of what has been working for him at Strasbourg has been the ability to be a little bit slower and methodical in the first phase of the build-up, and then speeding it up in the second and third phase, very similar to De Zerbi. But what that does create sometimes is gaps in spaces between the attackers and the midfielders, and then the midfielders and the defender. It just presents issues that later on in the game can be exploited. When you have those types of spaces, it's very easy for teams to play through you. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a fan of quick strike offense, especially in the final third. I like when teams are, you know, very direct in the final third and looking to play quickly, get 1v1 situations, which was what I think Liam Rosenior's system is setting up. They're looking to get 1v1 situations, isolating defenders against attackers who, you know, have attacking guile and ability in the final third. If you do not score, if the ball gets turned over, or if, you know, for whatever reason, you know, the play is snuffed out, you have massive gaps of space for the opposition to exploit. So for me, I just prefer more compact systems where the spaces between the defenders and the midfielders and the attackers are no more than maybe 10 yards at most, because that amoeba style of system allows you to counter press effectively. You have more bodies forward, and it also makes it harder for teams to counter attack you as well, because you have so many players in and around, that are a little bit more compact. The spaces in between them aren't exploitable as easily. Now in the second phase of their build-up, you tend to see two different systems employed here. It's either a 3-2-4-1 with a double pivot where they're playing against a back four, or you see a 3-4-3 where they have a diamond in the midfield. And it's not too dissimilar from what Maresca had employed versus back fives in the Premier League this year. New install from last year is, yeah, they're basically looking to, if you're coming with 5, we want to attack with 6. And I think it is similar to the philosophy that Rosenior is employing at Strasbourg, or was employing at Strasbourg, but the only difference is the principles are still quite different. I think that when I watch Rosenior's teams play against back fives, they're looking to be a lot more attack minded and less probing. They're looking to look to quick strike offense once again. So once they get into that the second phase of their build-up, they're looking to attack that back line immediately, and they're looking to go 1v1 against these attackers. I think in League One, they're in the top 3 in terms of like through balls, if not number 1, which means that they are looking to be more decisive in that final third. Now, before we get into how this system of play will be adapted at Chelsea and who will be the beneficiaries of this style of play, I wanted to look at how Strasbourg play out of possession under Rosenior. And when I did look, it was clearly to me that it was a very, very aggressive, high press, man-to-man marking. It looked to me like in Fulham, that was a very similar install to what Strasbourg normally play, like a lot of high pressing, and again those spaces in between the defenders and the midfielders just producing massive gaps. And in the Fulham game, again, we can make the argument as to whether or not that was actually a Liam Rosenior install or was a McFarlane, but it looks similar to me. And the things that I saw that were frightening were the spaces, again, in between the defenders and the midfielders. We had about 6 players pressing up high up the pitch. At times we also had center backs pressing up the pitch. If teams start seeing that this is where we're soft, that we're not as compact as we were under Maresca, this is where the issues are going to start to arise. It's this space that I think that Rosenior is going to have to work out in the Premier League. If we're going to play this high press, where we're committing so many bodies forward in a man press system, we are certainly going to have to be a lot more compact in terms of our spacing between the defenders and the midfielders. We cannot allow for chasms of space for teams to exploit. Now, what's going to be interesting in the coming weeks is deciphering what shape Rosenior wants to play and what players he wants in those positions, given the particular shape. Now, if for sure, I think it's easy to decipher if Chelsea decide, or if Rosenior decides to play the 3-1-6, where we have 1 sitter and then 2 more attacking aides. I think it's obvious we're going to see Enzo and Santos in those roles, with Caicedo being the solo pivot. But what I think is going to be interesting to figure out when we go forward is if we decide to go with the 3-2-4-1 build, how we implement Reece James in this setup. Is he just going to be a right-sided center back instead of like Fofana, or is he somebody that's going to be a little bit more dynamic and looking to overlap in the final third, or underlap in some cases, as we've seen with Strasbourg? How does he use Reece James? And if not Reece James, is it going to be Gusto when we decide to activate the fullback on the right? I, for one, would love to see Reece James used in a more attacking role. I think that he is just deadly on the ball. His ball striking, his decision making, his passing, his crossing is something that we sorely miss in our attacking sequences. And granted, I get it, it's injury related, and we're not going to necessarily see the best of Reece James in all the matches, but in situations where we are looking to attack teams and we're looking to be the protagonists on the ball, I would love to see Reece James in a role where he can utilize the best of his skill sets, which is ball striking, crossing, and decision making. And yeah, that's one thing, but I don't know exactly what we're going to see in terms of how Rosenior wants to use the fullbacks. Maybe it's Cucurella that becomes the more active fullback on the left, and you see somebody like Reece James being used as the third defender to make up the back three. It's hard to say. I think that both Reece James and Cucurella are ideally suited for that back three role in terms of like their ability to defend, but you lose aspects of their game if you do not allow them to maraud forward a little bit more. I really think that the main thing that we're going to get out of this whole thing is ROSENIOR is very aggressive and he wants to be a protagonist when in possession. And some of the weaknesses that we see in his setup is basically because he is so aggressive on his pursuit of wanting to be probing teams in the final third. But I do think I'm going to wrap it up there. And thank you once again for tuning in. If you've made it this far, please do smash a like and a subscribe if you haven't already to keep us in the algorithm and growing this channel. Now, I'm very, very excited for this Charlton game because I think it's an opportunity to see some players we haven't seen in quite some time. I'm talking about like Hato. We're talking about the likes of maybe even Guiu, a couple other players that haven't played a lot of football, with the one eye on, of course, advancing in the FA Cup, but also another eye on what we're going to be, who we're going to be facing in the midweek, which is Arsenal in the Carabao Cup. So there is an opportunity for rotation here, and I'm wondering what type of lineup Leon ROSENIOR is deploying for his debut, his maiden voyage as Chelsea manager. As I said before, he gets my full support for reasons that I don't really want to lay out here. But all Chelsea managers, regardless of who they are, usually get my support, and he's no different. Whether or not I think he is the right guy for the job at this point in time, I don't think that what he's done in football at this point is enough to warrant getting the position as Chelsea manager, given the stakes being as high as they are and the responsibility and the pressure to succeed being so high. But at the same time, like, he has to take it, and for him, it's an opportunity to really show his acumen as a footballer, as a manager, and to stamp his authority at the highest level of the game. So sure, he's going to take it, but whether or not what we see from him is him being thrown to the wolves or him actually taking the opportunity by two hands and just like running with it remains to be seen. But I'm here for it. Never a dull moment at Chelsea. Here we are again. Until then, keep the blue flag flying high and up the Chelsea. Peace.